Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The moment the energy core activated, the galaxy held its breath. Deep within the heart of Cybertron, Megatron's laughter echoed through the metallic halls, resonating with a power that seemed to pulse with the very core of the planet. He stood before the control panel, his eyes glowing a sinister crimson as the ancient machinery around him roared to life. The storm had begun. It started small, a ripple in the fabric of space-time, a crackle of energy that spiraled outward, growing exponentially with each passing moment. Across the galaxy, stars flickered, their light dimming as the energy storm began to consume all in its path. Entire planets trembled, their cores vibrating with the resonance of the storm's unimaginable power. And at the center of it all, Megatron, merged with the super energy core, stood triumphant. On a distant planet, Bumblebee stood frozen, his yellow and black armor reflecting the distant glow of Cybertron. The distress signal from the Autobots was faint, barely discernible over the static, but its message was clear. Megatron had triggered the super energy core, and the entire galaxy was at risk. Optimus Prime was unreachable, his location unknown, and the weight of responsibility fell squarely on Bumblebee's shoulders. His spark raced, uncertainty gnawing at him. He wasn't a leader, at least not like Optimus. But there was no time to question himself, no. The storm was spreading, and every second lost meant another system consumed. He had to act. Patch me through to the Andromeda system. Bumblebee ordered his ship. SAI, the hum of the engine barely noticeable over the distant rumbles of spacequake. If he was going to stop this, he would need help, powerful help. And the Andromeda system housed some of the most skilled warriors in the galaxy. The comm crackled, and moments later, the holographic image of Zara, the warrior queen of Andromeda, appeared before him. Her eyes were sharp, her features regal and commanding, with an aura of electromagnetic energy subtly crackling around her. Bumblebee, Zara greeted her, voice cool but laced with respect. I take it this call is not for pleasantry. No, Bumblebee replied, straight to the point. It's Megatron. He says activated something, a super energy core from Cybertron. The galaxy is on the brink of destruction. We need your help. Zara's eyes narrowed. A storm of such magnitude, ... It would take all of our combined forces to even have a chance of stopping it. I assume you've already contacted others. I am working on it, Bumblebee said, but Andromeda is one of the first systems in the storm. We don't have much time. Zara paused, her gaze distant for a moment. Then with a determined nod, she said, you have the support of Andromeda. Send me your coordinates, and we will meet at the edge of the Triangulum Galaxy. There's someone there who owes me a favor, a pirate named Talon. His ship can bend light itself. We will need him for that. As the transmission ended, Bumblebee leaned back in his pilot seat, relief washing over him briefly. One ally secured, but the storm was still growing, and Zara's warning echoed in his mind. They would need all their combined forces. The next stop was Sirius. The journey to Sirius was short, but the scene awaiting Bumblebee was grim. The storm had already begun to tear through the outer planets of the system, leaving them barren and devoid of life. Resources were stripped, leaving only the skeletal remains of once thriving world. Bumblebee landed on one of the last surviving colonies, his metal feet sinking into the dust-covered surface. As he moved through the desolate streets, his sensors picked up the faint life signature he was searching for. A former enemy, now the last hope of Sirius. Tito says people had once fought against the Autobots, driven by the Decepticons' lies and promises of power. But now, with the storm tearing through their worlds, Carol had become disillusioned, seeking redemption for his past mistake. Bumblebee found him in what remained of a once grand temple, kneeling before a flickering hologram of his fallen comrade. The two locked eyes, a silent acknowledgement of their shared history and the unspoken tension between them. You've come to gloat, Autobot. Tal's voice was bitter, but there was no venom in it. I have come to ask for your help, Bumblebee replied, stepping forward cautiously. The storm is spreading, and soon it will reach the core worlds. We need to stop it. Carol stood slowly, his eyes filled with weariness and regret. And you think I can help after everything I've done? I know you can, Bumblebee said firmly. You guys fought against us, but now you have a chance to fight for something greater. If we don't stop Megatron, there won't be anything left to fight for. Carol looked away, his fists clenching. The weight of his decisions seemed to press down on him, but after a long moment of silence, he nodded. For Sirius, I'll fight. With cattle on board, Bumblebee's alliance was growing, but the hardest challenge still lay ahead, reaching Cybertron and confronting Megatron himself. The journey to the Triangulum Galaxy was fraught with danger. The energy storm was expanding faster than expected, devouring everything in its path. Planets, moons, even entire solar systems were being stripped of their resources, their life forces drained into the storm. And in the midst of this chaos, Bumblebee and his team had to navigate through enemy territory to meet Talon, the infamous space pirate. Talon's reputation was as shadowy as his appearance. He operated on the fringes of the law, known for his mastery of stealth and his ship's unique ability to bend light, making it invisible to even the most advanced detection systems. Zara had fought him in the past, but now they needed him. His ship would be their best chance to slip past Megatron's defenses on Cybertron. When they finally reached the rendezvous point, Talon was waiting for them. His ship, a sleek black vessel with an almost organic design, hovered silently in the void of space. Talon himself was just as imposing, his sharp features and cold eyes betraying little emotion as he greeted the group. "So, the great Bumblebee comes to me for help," Talon said, a smirk playing on his lips. "Never thought I'd see the day." "This isn't a negotiation," Zara cut in, her eyes blazing with the same intensity as the storm. "The galaxy is at stake. We don't have time for your game." Talon raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by Zara's fiery demeanor, but after a brief pause, he nodded. All right, I'll help, but let's get one thing straight. I am doing this for my own reason. If Megatron destroys the galaxy, there won't be anything left for me to loot." With the team assembled, Bumblebee laid out the plan. They would need to split into two groups, one to create a diversion by attacking Megatron's outer defenses, and the other to infiltrate Cybertron and disable the super energy core. It was a dangerous plan, but it was the only way to stop the storm before it consumed the galaxy entirely. Talon's ship would be the key to getting them past Megatron's defenses undetected. Once inside, they would have to fight their way through Decepticon forces, disable the core, and sever Megatron's connection to it. Failure wasn't an option. As they approached Cybertron, the true scale of the storm became clear. The planet's surface was bathed in an eerie, shifting light, as if the energy of the storm was alive, feeding off the resources it consumed. The storm's tendrils snaked out from the core, reaching into the stars, pulling entire planets into its grasp. Bumblebee felt a chill run through his circuits. The weight of the mission pressed down on him like never before. This wasn't just about saving a planet or defeating a foe. This was about saving the entire galaxy from total annihilation. As they descended towards Cybertron, the tension in the air was palpable. Talon's ship hummed silently, its cloaking system shielding them from detection as they navigated through the storm's chaotic energy field. "Hold on," Talon muttered, his hands steady on the controls. "This is gonna get bumpy." Without warning, a surge of energy erupted from the storm, lashing out towards the ship like a living creature. Talon swerved, narrowly avoiding the blast, but the ship was thrown into a spiral, its system struggling to maintain stability. "We're almost there," Bumblebee shouted, gripping the console tightly as the ship leveled out. The surface of Cybertron loomed closer, the fortress of Megatron visible in the distance, shrouded in a vortex of energy. But the hardest part was yet to come. The fortress loomed larger with every passing second, a jagged, monstrous structure, pulsing with energy from the storm that surrounded it. Talon maneuvered the ship expertly, his fingers dancing over the controls as they slipped through the perimeter undetected. Bumblebee sensors flared. Decepticons patrolled every inch of the fortress, exterior scanning the horizon for any sign of resistance. But thanks to Talon's cloaking, they passed right by, unseen and unheard. As they neared the central core, Bumblebee felt the immense power of the super energy core thrumming through the walls of the ship. His circuits tangled with its overwhelming force. This was what they had come for, and now it was within their grasp. "Landing now," Talon muttered, bringing the ship down in a hidden alcove, safely shielded from view. "This is as close as we were going to get without setting off alarm." Bumblebee took a deep breath and stepped out of the ship. His team followed Zara with her electromagnetic energy already crackling around her, ready for battle. Carol, grim and silent but resolute, and Talon ever the opportunist, but for now, their only chance at stealth. They moved quickly, silently, through the metallic corridors of the fortress. The entire structure hummed with energy, and the deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. "We're close," Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can feel it." Keel nodded. "The core is just ahead, but so is Megatron." Bumblebees stopped at a junction in the corridor, the path splitting in two directions. His sensors detected movement. Decepticons were nearby. He motioned for the others to hold, listening carefully. Footsteps. Heavy, slow. The unmistakable sound of Soundwave, one of Megatron's most loyal lieutenants. "We don't have time for this," Talon whispered, his voice tense. "If they spot us, it's done over." "We were not getting past Soundwave without a fight," Bumble says. B whispered back. "He's guarding the main control room. If we don't take him down, we'll never reach the core." Before Bumblebee could respond, Sora was already moving. She dashed forward, her body blurring with speed as she unleashed a wave of electromagnetic force. Soundwave turned just in time to see her, but it was too late. The energy struck him like a lightning bolt, shorting out his circuits and sending him crashing to the ground in a heap of metal. "Move," Bumblebee shouted, leading the charge past the fallen Decepticon. They didn't have long before reinforcements arrived. They burst into the main control room, the heart of the fortress, where the super energy core pulsated within a massive containment chamber. The core itself was a blinding, swirling mass of pure energy, its power feeding the storm that raged across the galaxy. And standing before it, connected to the core by thick cables of energy, was Megatron. His eyes burned with a terrifying red light as he turned to face them. The energy from the core surged through his body, making him larger, stronger, more powerful than they had ever seen him. He was no longer just a Decepticon leader. He was something more, something transcendent. "Bumblebee," Megatron growled, his voice distorted by the power coursing through him. "You are too late. The storm is unstoppable now. You cannot hope to defeat me." Bumblebee's grip tightened on his blaster. "We were not here to defeat you, Megatron. We were here to stop the storm." Megatron laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber like thunder. "Fool, I am the storm." Without another word, Megatron raised his arm, and a surge of energy shot out from his body, slamming into Bumblebee and the other. Bumblebee was thrown backward, crashing into the wall with enough force to dent the metal. Zara managed to throw up a shield of electromagnetic energy, but even that was barely enough to hold back the raw power of Megatron's attack. Kyle and Talon were thrown to the ground, struggling to recover. Bumblebee groaned as he pulled himself to his feet. His systems were damaged, but he couldn't stop. Now if they didn't destroy the core, the galaxy was doomed. "Zara, the cables," he shouted over the roar of energy. "We need to sever his connection to the core." Zara nodded, her face set with determination. She charged forward, her body glowing with energy as she unleashed a concentrated blast at the cables connecting Megatron to the core. The energy struck, true, but the cables were more resilient than they appeared. They crackled and sparked, but they didn't break. Megatron sneered, his voice booming over the chaos. "You think you can sever my connection to the core? Pathetic." Bumblebee gritted his teeth. He needed to get closer, needed to find a way to cut those cables himself. But Megatron was too strong, his energy field too powerful. There was only one way. "Kyle," Bumblebee called out, catching the warrior's eye. "I need you to distract him. I'll go for the cable." Kyle's face was grim, but he nodded without hesitation. He knew what this meant. He knew the risks, but he also knew that this was their only chance. "Go," Kyle said, drawing his blade. "I'll hold him off." Before Bumblebee could say another word, Carol charged at Megatron, his sword blazing with energy. Megatron turned, his eyes narrowing as Kazale leaped toward him, swinging his blade in a wide arc. The blade struck Megatron's energy field, sending sparks flying, but it did little to slow the Decepticon leader. Still, it was enough. While Megatron was distracted, Bumblebee made his move. He dashed toward the cables, his blaster ready. The energy around the core was intense, almost unbearable, but Bumblebee forced himself forward. He raised his blaster and fired, aiming for the thickest of the cable. The shot hit its mark. The cable exploded in a shower of sparks, and Megatron roared in fury as the energy feeding into him began to wane. But it wasn't high enough. There were still more cables, and Bumblebee's send time was running out. Zara was at his side now, her electromagnetic powers focused on another cable. Together, they attacked, firing everything they had at the connections that tied Megatron to the super energy core. One by one, the cables snapped, each one weakening Megatron further. But even weakened, Megatron was still dangerous. He lashed out with a blast of energy, catching Carol full in the chest. The warrior cried out in pain as he was thrown across the room, his body slamming into the wall with a sickening crunch. No, Bumblebee shouted, his heart pounding in his chest. Carol didn't move. But there was no time to mourn. There was still one last cable, the final connection between Megatron and the core. Bumblebee aimed his blaster, his hands shaking, his systems on the verge of collapse. He fired. The cable snapped. Megatron screamed as the last of the energy drained from his body, his form shrinking, his power fading. The storm outside began to falter, the tendrils of energy retracting, the devastation slowing. But it wasn't over yet. Megatron, though weakened, was still standing. His eyes burned with hatred as he staggered forward, his hands crackling with what little energy remained. "You think you've won?" he growled, his voice barely a whisper. "The storm will never end as long as I left." Bumblebee stood tall, his blaster trained on Megatron. "Then you won," he lit. Before Megatron could react, Bumblebee fired one last shot, striking the Decepticon leader square in the chest. Megatron's body convulsed, the last of the energy exploding outward in a blinding flash. And then silent. The storm had ended. Bumblebee stood over Megatron as fallen form, his spark heavy with the weight of what they had lost. Carol was gone, the galaxy was in ruins, but the storm was over. The galaxy, for all its scars, would survive. Zara approached, her face solemn. Bumblebee nodded, his voice quiet. "It's done. As they stood together, watching the storm dissipate, Bumblebee knew that the battle was over, but the rebuilding would only just begin. The galaxy would remember this day, the day they stopped the storm. The day they fought for their survival, and the day they proved that, even in the darkest of times, hope could still prevail.